Should children attend funerals, or is that a big mistake? Yes, generally speaking, they should attend funerals, but it isn't quite that simple. I'm going to discuss 10 things you should consider regarding children and funerals. I've talked to countless adults that remember back to childhood when a dear loved one died and no one took them to the funeral. And now, as an adult, they talk with tremendous regret about not being able to attend. They often speak about feeling that something is missing, and they are frustrated and angry that they were not able to participate and say goodbye. In contrast, it's very rare that I hear an adult talk about attending a funeral as a child as an experience they regret. And in the rare cases they do regret it, I believe the funeral could have been a helpful experience if the adults had done a few things differently. So I'm going to discuss 10 things to consider regarding children and funerals to help you make the funeral as helpful as possible for the child. First, we need to recognize why we're having a child attend a funeral. In my professional experience as a psychologist and my personal experience as a father of 3 children, a child's imagination will almost always create something more frightening than reality. So if you're worried that taking your child to a funeral will expose them to scary images, I would argue that their imagination will create something far worse than anything they'll see at a funeral. Another consideration is how young is too young for a child to attend a funeral. I believe that if the child is old enough to recognize and remember the deceased, then they are old enough to attend at least some of the funeral rituals. And certainly by the time a child is talking, I believe that it is important to include the child in some of the funeral rituals. This leads us to our third consideration. Not every child has to attend the actual funeral ceremony. You may choose to have younger children attend other funeral rituals. For example, they can attend a viewing, a wake, or visitation or graveside service instead of the actual funeral service. The advantage of these other events is that it's much easier for a child to attend just a short portion of the event. As in the cases of a visitation, they don't have to stay for the whole time. And graveside services or committals tend to be much shorter than actual funeral ceremonies. My fourth consideration is an argument for times when you may not want to take a child to a funeral. In some cases, the child may not really know or had a close relationship with the deceased. In short, the closer the relationship between the child and the deceased, the more I would encourage you to have the child attend. But if the deceased is the child's second cousin who they've only met once in their life and they don't even remember their name, you probably don't have to take that child to the funeral. On the other hand, children may be very close to others that aren't blood relatives. For example, they may be very close to a child care provider, a teacher, or another person they spend a lot of time with. In those cases, I'd be much more likely to have the child attend at least some of the funeral rituals. If you've decided that the child will be attending at least some of the funeral services, then it is critical to have a conversation with them about several key things. The conversation should include a brief discussion of what happened that led to the person's death, what will happen at the funeral service or viewing or visitation, and what behavior you expect from them. You should also take plenty of time to answer any questions they have. You should always have this conversation with children before attending a funeral event or service, and then also ask if they have any questions after the funeral service. A sixth consideration is what language you use regarding how you describe the cause of death. I have another video specifically on how to talk to children about death, so you may find that helpful. In general, keep it relatively short and use concrete, simple terms. And avoid using words or metaphors that suggest that the deceased is sleeping or resting. Young children easily confuse the concepts of death and sleeping, and it's best to be clear yet gentle in our descriptions. Earlier, I mentioned that in some cases, it is more appropriate for a child to attend a viewing or visitation or wake instead of attending a funeral service. The seventh consideration is to have a child attend a visitation or viewing in addition to the funeral service. By attending rituals such as visitations or viewings before the funeral, children can get used to the entire idea of a funeral before it happens. These pre-funeral ceremony events also allow children more freedom to ask questions that arise as they see the deceased and are in the funeral home or location of the funeral. Another good reason to have children attend these pre-ceremony events is that they provide an unhurried time and place to use healing funeral rituals without being the focus of everyone's attention. For example, you may ask the child to color a picture or write a letter that they place in the casket. It also provides time for them to talk to the deceased and also receive direct support from adults. So attending the pre-ceremony events will often make the actual funeral service less of a shock. This leads to number 8. Don't force a child to participate in a public way at the funeral service. For example, the child may be a gifted singer, musician, or speaker, but don't force them to get up in front of a group to share their gifts. It's different if that is something they freely choose to do, but don't make it an expectation. It's hard enough for adults to be in front of others at the funeral service, and it can be really difficult for a child to do. Number 9, don't judge a child's grief response. Often children will be sad or angry, but sometimes it will seem as if the loss doesn't matter to the child. They may be hyper, rambunctious, giddy, or even silly. This type of response may be from the child not knowing how to act, not fully recognizing the permanence of the death, or simply a different way for them to express their discomfort. Whatever the reaction is, try to be as patient and understanding as possible. And finally, number 10. This one is more of a suggestion for adults, but it has a direct impact on children. Adults, don't hide your grief from children. You don't need to act strong for their sake. What can happen is that children are watching you and may assume they are grieving wrong and they need to act like the loss didn't matter to them. If you know that you are likely to be really upset at the funeral, then simply explain this to the child and have a trusted adult present that will be able to focus on the needs of the child. But please don't set the example of hiding or holding back your grief. It can be very helpful to a child to see that their grief can be expressed, and that's okay. Having children attend funerals can be a little tricky, and there are few hard and fast rules that work in every situation. But I hope these 10 considerations help you think through how you can best support a child before and during funeral rituals. In the comments, please share any experiences you may have had regarding attending or not attending a funeral as a child, as well as creative ways to support children before and during funerals. And please share this if you think someone else could benefit from it. If you would like a free e-booklet on helping grieving children and teens, then please click the link below or visit this website.